A rogue state tends to be a state which is threatening global peace or international stability. These states tend to meet a certain criteria, such as being ruled by an authoritarian or totalitarian government that severely restricts human rights, sponsor terrorism, and/or seeks to proliferate weapons of mass destruction. There have been many states which fit this criteria over the course of history, but presently, in 2024, the term rogue state has been used to describe the countries of Iran, Syria, North Korea, Afghanistan under the Taliban, Cuba, and Venezuela. A rogue state, however, is not a pariah state, which is a nation considered to be an outcast of the international community. Unlike a rogue state, the criteria for a pariah state is that the state cannot have a strong national identity, not be regarded as a major international power, regardless of size, but must develop a form of siege mentality, where the pariah state views themselves against everyone else in the world, and that the pariah state tends to undermine the existing international system. A pariah state may face international isolationism, sanctions, or even invasion by other nations who find its policies, actions, or even its very existence to be unacceptable. Got it? Great. Back to rogue states. President Ronald Reagan began the concept for what was considered to be a rogue state in 1985 by stating that since the end of World War II, the United States has not tolerated and will no longer tolerate states which fit into the criteria that I previously listed. In 1994, under the Clinton administration, the states of North Korea, Cuba, Iran, Libya under Muammar Gaddafi, and Iraq under Saddam Hussein were considered to be rogue states. But the administration left Pakistan and Syria off of the list because the U.S. had close relations with Pakistan, and Clinton also hoped for some reason that Syria would play an important role in Arab-Israeli peace after the end of the Gulf War. Other states that would be treated as a rogue state in the 90s were Yugoslavia because of Milosevic's actions towards the breakup of Yugoslavia because, genocide, massacres, and general Balkan ethnic cleansing. The Sudan and Afghanistan under the Taliban were also treated as rogue states for hosting terrorist groups, most notably being Al-Qaeda. When being treated as a rogue state, general consequences were harsh sanctions, and in cases such as Iraq and Yugoslavia, airstrikes occurred to get the rogue state to comply with a UN resolution. A failed state, on the other hand, has lost its ability and credibility to fulfill fundamental security and developmental functions as the state is lacking effective control over its own territory and borders. The number one qualification for a functioning state is having the monopoly on the use of violence, being that the state security forces have more power in regions than non-state groups such as militias or other irregular political paramilitary forces, like terrorist groups. Common characteristics of a failed state include a government that is incapable of tax collection, law enforcement, security assurances, territorial control, political or civil office staffing, and infrastructure maintenance due to a variety of concerns against elements within the state's own population. Again, mostly relating to the state's monopoly on violence. Corruption, mass criminal elements like gangs or even terrorist groups holding territory, sharp economic downturn, and military interventions into the country from other outside states, and the presence of warlords are also very telling signs of a failed state. Failed states can also be narco-states where the transnational narcotics trade runs the country's economy, or at least plays a large part in it, such as the case in Syria under Assad's regime. Also, if a state relies on terrorist groups or non-state paramilitaries to maintain control on the monopoly of violence is a huge sign of a failed state, even if the non-state paramilitaries have temporary loyalty to the state. Examples of a failed state include, but are not limited to, Somalia, Syria, Libya, South Sudan, Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Afghanistan under the Taliban. As a case study, Iraq was a failed state during the 2006 to 2008 sectarian civil war between Shia and Sunni groups. However, the state became functional again after the success of the United States troop surge at the end of the Civil War. Iraq was also not a failed state during its renewed war in Iraq from 2013 to 2017, as although ISIS was able to make large gains against the state security forces, which initially fell like a paper tiger, the government was still functioning in its respective regions and made large pushes against ISIS with international support to retake the country. But the point is that the government was still functional at this time, regardless of how weak it was. This is of course just a brief overview of rogue states and failed states. Did you know about these applications in international affairs to states before this video? Write in the comments, and thanks for watching.